You'd be nothing without me, Lisa. Nothing. That's what Mark said, right before he slammed the door and walked out to meet a client. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. And that sentence, those words, felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I stood there in the kitchen, my hands still on the counter, staring at the half-empty wine glass he left behind. The man I'd shared 20 years of my life with had reduced me to nothing. I used to believe him when he said things like that. I'd left my career as a nurse when our second child was born because he said, "We can't afford a nanny, and you're better with the kids." So I stayed home. I managed everything, bills, meals, school drop-offs, even his parents' doctor visits, while he built our future. And now, apparently, I was nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked past midnight, and I stared at his side of the bed untouched. He didn't even bother pretending anymore. He used to make up excuses, business dinners, late meetings, but lately he didn't even try. Around 2 a.m., I got up, walked to his office downstairs, and opened his laptop. I knew his password. I'd always known. Birth year plus our anniversary. How ironic. My hands were shaking as I went through his emails. And there it was. Her name, Rebecca. Young. Blonde. Marketing consultant. Hundreds of messages. Dinner reservations. Hotel receipts. Pictures. Even a plane ticket for a conference in Miami. 2 seats booked. Not one. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there. My heart felt like it was outside my body. He'd been sleeping with her for at least 8 months. 8 months of pretending. Of touching me like I was invisible. Of calling me bitter when I asked questions. When I finally cried, it wasn't loud. It was small. Quiet. Like I didn't want to wake my own heartbreak. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. Pancakes for Emma, eggs for Jack. When Mark came down, I said nothing. He looked tired, or maybe guilty. Hard to tell. He kissed Emma on the head, grabbed his coffee, and said, "Don't wait up tonight. Late client dinner." I looked at him for a long moment. "Of course," I said. My voice didn't even crack. That was the moment I decided. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't throw his things out or make a scene. He thought silence made me weak. He was wrong. Because silence gave me time to plan. That day, after dropping the kids at school, I drove to a small bank near downtown. I opened a savings account under my maiden name. Then I pulled out my old nursing license from the file drawer, expired, but still valid for renewal. I went home, made a list of every bill in the house, every joint account, every password. If Mark wanted war, he'd never see mine coming. I wasn't going to be his victim anymore. Not the woman who waited by the window. Not the wife who believed every lie. That night, he didn't come home till 1 a.m. I pretended to be asleep. When he climbed into bed, he whispered, "You're so quiet lately." I kept my eyes closed. Yeah, I thought. Quiet enough to bury you. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My eyes were puffy, skin dull, hair tied up in the same messy bun I'd worn for years. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I used to be strong, confident, funny, alive. Somewhere along the way, I became the background character in my own life. But not anymore. I pulled out a notebook from the kitchen drawer and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. Get your life back, one step at a time. Under that, I listed everything he'd taken control of. The house deed, car payments, joint checking account, insurance, even the kids' school fees. It was terrifying to see how dependent I'd become. Every credit card, every bill, every signature had his name on it. But I knew how to fix it. I started small. That afternoon, while he was at work, I called my old supervisor from the hospital. "Hi, this is Lisa Walker. I used to work in the ER about 15 years ago," I said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause, then laughter. "Lisa. Oh my God. I remember you. How have you been?" Her name was Karen. She told me they had part-time shifts open, mostly weekends. I told her I'd renew my license and call her back. When I hung up, I cried again, not from pain this time, but from relief. Like I'd just found a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. That evening, Mark came home with that same fake smile energy. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll be in the office. I've got reports due." I nodded, stirring the pasta sauce. He didn't even notice the coldness in my tone anymore. He was on his phone the entire dinner. Texting. Smirking. Emma asked, "Dad, are you going to my game on Friday?" He didn't even look up. "We'll see, honey. Daddy's busy." I clenched my fork so hard it nearly bent. He had time for Rebecca, but not his daughter's soccer game. When the kids went to bed, I opened my laptop. Google search. How to legally protect yourself during divorce. It was like stepping into a world I'd never wanted to know. Property division, child custody, hidden assets, infidelity evidence. I read for hours, taking notes, creating folders, saving documents. At 1:14 a.m., I opened a new email and sent a message to myself. Subject: Evidence Week 1. Attachments: screenshots of his hotel bookings, messages, and expense receipts. I even backed them up to a flash drive. Hidden inside an old box of Christmas ornaments. He'd never find it there. Days passed. I stopped waiting for him to call. Instead, I called my lawyer. Well, not my lawyer yet, but one a friend recommended. Her name was Patricia, a tough woman in her 50s with a calm voice that made you feel like you were finally safe. We met at a small cafe away from town. I told her everything. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You've been smart already. Quiet. Strategic. Don't let him see you rattled. We'll start with financial disclosures and gather proof of the affair. Don't confront him yet." "Not even once?" I asked. She smiled. "No. Let him think he's still winning. That's how you'll win." I walked out of that meeting feeling like a soldier who'd just received her battle plan. That night, I didn't flinch when Mark came home late. I didn't care when he smiled at his phone or took it to the bathroom. He thought I was still broken, still scared. But I was building something stronger, something he couldn't destroy this time. When he finally turned off the lights and whispered, "You okay, babe?" I just said, "Never better." And I meant it. I started noticing patterns. His client dinners always fell on the same days, Tuesdays and Fridays. His credit card statements showed restaurants in neighborhoods we never went to. He wasn't even careful anymore. That arrogance would cost him. By the second week, I'd gathered enough to make Patricia smile during our next meeting. "This is good," she said, flipping through the printed screenshots I handed her. "Very good. But we need to secure your finances before we make any legal move." So that night, I quietly transferred half of my personal savings, money from my mother's inheritance, into the new account under my maiden name. Legally, it was mine. But Mark always made me feel guilty for keeping it separate. He used to call it our emergency fund. Funny, I thought. I guess this counts as an emergency. The next morning, I took my nursing license renewal forms to the post office. The lady at the counter smiled when she handed me the receipt. It felt like the first step toward my freedom had been stamped and mailed. By then, I'd stopped pretending to care about Mark's excuses. When he'd come home late, I wouldn't even ask where he'd been. That silence drove him crazy. One night, he actually snapped. "What's your problem lately? You barely talk to me." I turned from the sink, drying my hands slowly. "Nothing," I said. He frowned. "You think you can guilt-trip me by acting cold? Grow up, Lisa." He grabbed his jacket and stormed out again. I watched him go, calm, quiet, unshaken. He didn't realize he'd just helped me. Every word he said would be useful later. A few days later, Rebecca's name appeared in his call log again. But this time, something different showed up, a receipt for a ring. A diamond ring. From a jeweler downtown. I felt my stomach twist. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning something. Maybe an engagement. Maybe a proposal after he left me. I wanted to scream, throw something, burn it all down. Instead, I wrote it down in my notebook. Ring bought March 14th for 37 p.m., $2,900. I was documenting my pain like evidence in a crime scene. Because it was one emotional fraud, betrayal, abandonment in slow motion. That weekend, he told me he'd be traveling for work. I smiled and said, "Of course. I'll take care of things here." Then I called Patricia. She said, "If he leaves town, that's your window. We can file without him interfering." So when his flight took off, I was sitting in my lawyer's office signing papers. Divorce petition, irreconcilable differences, supported by proof of infidelity. I didn't shake when I signed. I didn't even cry. It was almost peaceful. Patricia looked at me and said, "You've done everything right. Now, stay calm when he finds out. He'll try to scare you. Don't let him." I nodded. He's underestimated me before. When he came home from his trip, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The kids were asleep. He dropped his suitcase and said, "You're still up?" I smiled. "Yeah, we need to talk." He froze. "About what?" I slid the envelope across the table, the one Patricia had mailed earlier that day. He stared at it, frowning. "What is this?" "Just read it." He tore it open. His face changed color as his eyes moved across the page. You filed for divorce? He whispered, like it was impossible. Yes. You, he laughed, a short, bitter sound. You think you can survive without me? I held his gaze. I already am. He stood there, speechless. The silence stretched between us, heavy, final. Then I got up, picked up my car keys, and said, I'll be staying at my sister's for a few days. The kids are asleep. Don't wake them. When I walked out that door, I didn't look back. It was the first time in years that I felt the air on my face and didn't feel trapped. The next morning, I woke up in my sister's guest room. First time in 20 years I'd slept without waiting for him. I checked my phone. 10 missed calls from Mark. 2 voicemails. 3 texts that swung from "you'll regret this" to "let's talk like adults." Classic manipulation. I ignored them. When I walked into the kitchen, my sister, Jenny, looked up from her coffee. You did it, huh? Yeah, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She nodded. Good. About damn time. By noon, the calls turned into threats. I'll make sure you don't get a dime, Lisa. You can't survive without my income. You're turning the kids against me. I saved every single message. Patricia told me to. Don't respond, she said. Let him talk himself into a corner. So I stayed quiet again. My silence was my shield. But silence doesn't mean weakness. I went back to my to-do list. Renew license, done. Apply for hospital position, done. I even updated my resume, something I hadn't done since 2005. It felt strange listing my skills again: emergency triage, patient care, medical records. But it also felt powerful. By Thursday, I got a call from Karen at the hospital. Lisa, the board approved your reentry. We'd love to have you back. Weekend shifts to start. Is that okay? I nearly cried. That's perfect. For the first time in years, I had a job that didn't depend on his permission. The kids were confused, of course. Emma, at 12, asked the hardest question. Mom, are you and Dad getting divorced? I didn't lie. Yes, sweetie. But it's not your fault. Not even a little. She cried quietly, and I held her. Jack, our 9-year-old, just asked, So who gets the Xbox? That made me laugh through the tears. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near the kids' school. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I bought secondhand furniture, used coupons for groceries, and learned how to do everything online: budgeting apps, expense trackers, legal forms. Mark used to mock me for being bad with money. Well, turns out I wasn't bad. I just never got the chance. Then came the first court hearing. He showed up with an expensive lawyer, tall, polished, smug. Mark wouldn't even look at me at first. When he finally did, it was that same smirk I'd seen 1,000 times. His lawyer started talking about unreasonable claims and marital assets acquired under his earnings. Mine, Patricia, just waited. Then she handed over the evidence packet. Receipts, emails, photos, timestamps. Even the ring purchase. The judge flipped through them silently, then looked up. Mr. Walker, is there any explanation for this correspondence with Ms. Rebecca Cole? Mark's lawyer tried to object. The judge waved it off. Overruled. Mark stammered something about professional relationship. The courtroom went silent until Patricia spoke. With respect, Your Honor, the professional relationship included multiple hotel stays, a diamond ring, and airline tickets to Miami. Would you like us to submit the photos? The color drained from his face. For the first time, I wasn't scared of him. Watching him squirm felt cleansing. Not joyful, not cruel, just right. When the hearing ended, his lawyer tried to corner me outside. You know, Mrs. Walker, this could get ugly. Settlements, custody battles. Patricia cut in smoothly. It already was ugly. She's just cleaning up the mess. That night, Mark sent one last text. You've ruined everything. Are you proud of yourself? I stared at the screen for a while, then typed back. No, just finally free. It wasn't over yet. He still had power, money, and influence. And men like him, they don't lose quietly. But I had something he didn't anymore: control. And I wasn't about to give it back. The next battle wouldn't be in a courtroom. It would be about my peace, my reputation, and my children's future. He wanted a war? I was ready. The next phase of his revenge wasn't legal. It was personal. Mark started calling mutual friends, twisting the story. She's lost it, he told them. Midlife crisis. Talking to lawyers behind my back. Someone even told me he'd said I was using the kids as weapons. I'd known him for half my life, and somehow, he still found new ways to humiliate me. When I picked up the kids from school one afternoon, I ran into Melissa, a mom from Emma's soccer team. She smiled awkwardly. "Hey, Lisa. I heard things are rough. You okay?" That fake sympathy stung worse than an insult. But I just smiled. Never better. And I meant it, because every rumor was proof he was scared. That night, I wrote another list in my notebook. Things I can control. My job. My kids. My peace. My future. I underlined my 3 times. Work became my escape. The first night back in the ER, everything came rushing back. The smell of antiseptic, the constant buzz of monitors, the adrenaline of saving someone's life. One of the nurses said, "You're a natural, Lisa. Feels like you never left." That compliment stayed with me all night. I wasn't Mark's wife here. I was just me. By the second week, my paycheck hit. It wasn't much, but when I held that envelope, I actually cried. Because that money was mine. No guilt. No permission. No strings attached. Then the first social media hit came. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot. Mark had posted a picture with Rebecca. Caption: New beginnings. Sometimes you have to walk away from toxicity. Over 100 likes. Comments like, "You deserve happiness," and "Proud of you, man." I stared at it for a while. My hand trembled. Then I laughed. Out loud. That was his play. Public sympathy, the good guy act. He wanted to paint me as the bitter ex-wife. But I wasn't going to fight him in the comments. No, I'd let his actions speak for themselves. I called Patricia. "He's posting about his new girlfriend already." She said, "Good. That's more proof of infidelity while the divorce is pending. Screenshot it." And I did. Every post, every comment, every picture. Evidence disguised as ego. At home, the kids were adjusting, but Emma struggled the most. She missed her dad. I didn't badmouth him. I just told her the truth. Sometimes adults make mistakes, honey. But it doesn't mean we stop loving you. That became our bedtime line, her version of safety. One evening, as I tucked her in, she asked softly, "Mom, are you happy?" I paused. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm getting there." A week later, I got an unexpected call. It was from one of Mark's old co-workers, David. "Hey, Lisa," he said awkwardly. "I know this is weird, but I thought you should know something." He hesitated. "Rebecca isn't just his girlfriend. She's been helping him move money from one of his accounts to hers." I overheard him bragging about it. I froze. "You're sure?" 100%. He said he was hiding assets before you could touch them. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my notebook. Then I called Patricia. "I think I just found what he's been hiding." She told me exactly what to do: bank subpoenas, financial audits, asset tracing. It sounded complicated, but she handled it like a pro. A week later, the truth came out in court filings. Multiple hidden transfers, offshore accounts, and fake consulting payments to Rebecca. When Mark's lawyer saw the evidence, his entire tone changed. Suddenly, there was talk of amicable resolution. Funny how truth makes bullies polite. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The city lights below shimmered like quiet applause. I wasn't celebrating his downfall. I was celebrating my survival. He tried to erase me. Instead, I'd exposed him. Not with rage, not with chaos, but with calm, deliberate truth. And I wasn't done yet. Because the best revenge wasn't ruining him. It was rebuilding myself higher than he could ever reach. The next few weeks were a blur of progress. Court hearings, work shifts, kids' schedules. My days were full, but for once the exhaustion felt earned. No longer from pleasing him. This time, it was from building myself back up. Patricia called one morning. "Lisa, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice full of quiet triumph. The financial investigator traced $78,000 in marital funds funneled to Rebecca's account. That's grounds for restitution. I sat down, stunned. So what happens now? He'll have to repay it, or lose more in the settlement. Either way, you win. Win. That word hadn't belonged to me in years. I almost didn't recognize it. But of course, Mark wasn't going to surrender gracefully. He started showing up unexpectedly. At the kids' school, at my apartment building, even outside the hospital parking lot. Never loud. Never physical. Just lurking. Enough to unsettle me. One night, I caught him waiting by my car after my shift. "Lisa," he said, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "We have lawyers for that. Come on, don't be like this. You're blowing this whole thing out of proportion." "You cheated, Mark," I said flatly. "That's not a misunderstanding. He stepped closer. You think you're better than me now? You're embarrassing yourself. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, Mark. I'm just not afraid of you anymore. I walked past him, got in my car, and drove away. That moment, that tiny act of defiance, felt bigger than any courtroom victory. The following week, Patricia filed for a restraining order. When the officer served him, he sent me one last message. You'll regret making me your enemy. I didn't reply. But inside I smiled. Because he wasn't my enemy anymore. He was just a chapter I'd already outgrown. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out. Melissa, the soccer mom who'd believed his lies, sent me a message. Lisa, I owe you an apology. I didn't know what he'd done. You've handled this with so much grace. You're inspiring. I stared at her text, speechless for a moment. Then I replied, thank you. I just did what I had to do. Word spread quietly. A few women from the community reached out privately. Stories of controlling husbands, financial manipulation, silent abuse. One even said, you gave me the courage to leave. That line hit me harder than anything Mark ever said. Maybe my story wasn't just revenge anymore. Maybe it was a blueprint. The settlement came through 2 months later. I got the house, primary custody of the kids, and half his retirement account. He got his guilt. The judge's words still echo in my head. Actions have consequences, Mr. Walker. Mrs. Walker's restraint and documentation show remarkable strength. When we walked out of that courtroom, Patricia turned to me and said, you handled this like a professional hit. Quiet, clean, unstoppable. We both laughed, and I told her, that's exactly what I wanted. That night, I took the kids to the old house. It was strange walking back into it. The place that had once felt like a cage now felt like reclaimed ground. Emma ran upstairs to her old room. Mom, it still smells like us. I smiled. Yeah, it's home again. I walked into what used to be Mark's office. The desk was still there, the same one where I'd first found his emails months ago. I sat down, opened the drawer, and found one of his old pens, engraved with his initials. Without hesitation, I threw it into the trash. No anger, no tears, just closure. That night, as I stood by the window, I realized something simple but profound. My revenge wasn't in the court ruling. It wasn't in his humiliation or loss of money. It was in my peace, in knowing he no longer had control over my voice, my time, or my future. He used to say I'd be nothing without him. Now I was everything despite him. And that silence he used to mock? It became the sound of my victory. After the settlement, life didn't magically become easy, but it finally felt mine. No more waiting for doors to slam, no more fake smiles at dinner, no more pretending everything was fine. The silence in the house was different now, peaceful, not painful. One Saturday morning, I stood in front of the mirror again. The same one I'd looked into the day after finding out about his affair. Back then, I saw a ghost. Now, I saw a woman who had survived fire and come out forged. There were still scars, emotional ones mostly. Some nights, I'd wake up from dreams of him yelling, or see his name flash on my phone and feel my chest tighten. But then I'd remember, he doesn't control you anymore. And the fear would fade. At work, my colleagues started calling me Mama Lisa. I'd bring snacks for the night shift, mentor younger nurses, and make jokes that lighten the mood after tough cases. One of them, a kind man named Tom, started asking if I wanted to grab coffee after work. For the first time in a long time, I didn't panic at the idea. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Maybe I wasn't ready to love again, but I was ready to live. One afternoon, while cleaning the old drawers at home, I found a small velvet box. It was the one he'd hidden the engagement ring for her in. Still there, unopened, untouched. I held it in my hand for a while, then walked outside and tossed it into the trash. Not out of anger, but as a quiet ceremony. That ring symbolized the woman I used to be. Waiting, loyal, naive. I was done with her. A few days later, I got a call from Patricia. Her voice was warm, proud. Lisa, the case is officially closed. Final papers signed. You're free to move on completely. I laughed. You sound happier than me, she said softly, because women like you remind the rest of us why we fight these battles. That night, I celebrated. Nothing fancy, just pizza and a movie with the kids. Halfway through, Emma looked at me and said, Mom, you're smiling more these days. I froze for a second, then smiled wider. Guess I am. It hit me then. Revenge hadn't just been about punishing him. It was about rebuilding the version of me he tried to destroy. A week later, I had to go to the courthouse to sign the final copy of the settlement. As I was leaving, I saw him standing in the hallway, thinner, tired, hollow-eyed. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You really did it, huh?" I nodded. "I did." He tried to laugh. "You know, I never thought you had it in you." I smiled gently. "You never looked close enough." Then I walked past him, and for the first time, he didn't follow. No words, no anger, just defeat. He wasn't the man who broke me anymore. He was just a man I used to know. Back home that night, I sat by the window again, same spot where I used to wait for him to come home. Only now, I wasn't waiting for anyone. The stars were out, the house was quiet, and my phone was off. Peace, it used to feel impossible. Now, it was my normal. I whispered to myself, he said I'd be nothing without him. But look at me now. And I meant it. Because in the end, my revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about reclaiming me. My power, my voice, my future. And the most brutal part? He'll have to live every day knowing that I thrived without him. It's been a year since that night. The night I walked out of the house he thought I'd never leave. A full year of starting over, one hard-earned step at a time. If you'd told me back then that I'd be happy again, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, still standing. Still breathing. Still me. The hospital offered me a full-time position last month. When Karen told me, I almost cried in her office. "You've come a long way, Lisa," she said. "You didn't just rebuild your life, you rebuilt your confidence." And she was right. Every shift, I help people fight to live. And it reminds me how hard I fought for my own life, too. There's a kind of peace in that. Mark still tries to call sometimes. Usually around the holidays, when loneliness hits him harder than pride. The first time he did, I answered. "Lisa," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I let the silence stretch. Not cold, not cruel, just honest. "Thank you," I said. "But I don't need it anymore." He sighed. "You really changed." I smiled to myself. "No, Mark. I just found the part of me you buried." Then I hung up. And that was the last time I heard his voice. The kids are doing well. Emma's a teenager now, confident, strong, outspoken. Sometimes I catch her standing in front of the mirror, tying her hair the same way I do before work. She told me once, "Mom, I want to be like you when I grow up." That sentence healed something inside me that therapy never could. Jack still asks about his dad sometimes, but he's adjusted. He loves our smaller house, the weekend pancakes, the movie nights where we fall asleep halfway through. It's not perfect, but it's real. And that's enough. Last week, I stood in front of that same mirror again, the one that's seen me at my weakest and strongest. I looked at my reflection and whispered the words that once broke me. "You'd be nothing without me." But this time I smiled, because now I could finally answer back. Funny. Turns out, I'm everything without you. People often ask me if I regret not taking revenge in a louder way. No shouting, no public scenes, no online smear. And my answer's always the same. Quiet revenge lasts longer. Because when you heal, rebuild, and thrive, your success becomes the echo they can never silence. My revenge wasn't a scream. It was the sound of my keys turning in my own front door. The sound of laughter returning to my home. The sound of my heartbeat finally syncing with peace. So if you're watching this, and you're where I was, remember this. Silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. And survival isn't weakness. It's power in its purest form. Because one day, the same voice that trembled when you said, "I can't do this," will say, "I made it." And you will. If you were me, what would you have done? Comment below. And remember, your silence doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous.